Welcome to week 2 of UAA. Thank you for joining us for the second session of today. From the University of Utah, I'm so happy to introduce Emily Housley and Zhao Bao Gao. Their presentation is titled, I'm Not That Kind of Guy, Reframing Mental Health Services for Male Students.
Well, first off, thank you to Wade and Sylvia for being the producer and moderator today. I'm Emily Housley. As mentioned, I'm an academic advisor in the College of Engineering.
I'm Jiabao Gao. So I have this dual role. I work for the University Counseling Center at the University of Utah. And I also have this embedded counselor, so which means half of my time I have the office in the College of Engineering. So I basically seeing engineering students during those times.
Great, and we're thankful for all of you that have joined the presentation today to discuss a very critical issue around mental health services for male students. And we're excited that you're here. And the genesis of this whole presentation came from a series of conversations I had with a student who disclosed that they were going through some really difficult times. When I suggested that they reach out to a counselor, they initially said, I'm not that kind of guy, hence the title of the presentation. So today we're going to talk about how to reframe mental health services for male students. So Zhao Bao is going to lead us off with a self-reflection activity.
Yeah, so I guess we can all take a deep breath together, right? So just like if you identify as a male, right? So I guess just like reflect on what would be the reasons you would not seek out for help, right? So if you don't identify as a male, you can think about someone in your life, right? Like your father or like someone in church or someone in your professional life, right? So it can be a struggle with anything. Doesn't necessarily has to do with mental health. Yeah, but just to reflect on those, what would be the struggles or challenges as a man to seek out for help, right? So don't think about something too traumatic, but if you feel you want to put the content in the chat box, feel free to do so. Yeah. So we're gonna take a minute to reflect on this together. And if you don't want to put in the chat box, you can keep those things in your mind, and we can, once we move forward, we're going to talk about the challenges or the roadblocks that keeps like a traditional man or male student seeking out for help.
Great, thanks Zhao Bao for starting us off there. Just start off too, this is our agenda. We're going to review the learning objectives of the presentation. We'll look at numbers to set the stage and give context to the world we're advising in. We'll talk about, as Zhao Bao mentioned, the roadblocks to treatment that our male students and those resistant to therapy might face. We'll talk about advising strategies, explore, validate, and support, campus strategies. And then we'll have a chance to work together as a group in a case study and discussion portion of the presentation, and we'll conclude and then take questions. At any time, if you do have questions as we're going through the information, please don't hesitate to put those questions in the Q&A portion of the event, and we'll do our best to answer those in a timely fashion. All right, so just to discuss the learning objectives, we want to reflect on our personal perceptions, beliefs, and attitudes about mental health and how it impacts our advising practices. We're going to learn the facts and issues about the current mental health situation and realm we're advising in students in today. And lastly, we're going to discuss and share best practices and strategies to increase our knowledge and toolkits to positively impact our students. So moving on to numbers, we want to preface this so that these are 2 slides, and it was a design decision to separate these facts and statistics into 2 slides, not because we felt they were so important to share all of them, and it just was really too crowded on one little slide. So that's the only reason we have 2 slides, is just to make it easier for us to look at the numbers. All right, so let's move along with that. So 39% of college students experience a significant mental health issue while in school.
Yeah, so 1 in 10 men have an eating disorder.
Utah has the 5th highest age-adjusted suicide rate in the US.
Suicide is the leading cause of death for Utah from age 18 to 24, based on the data in 2019.
Males in Utah had significantly higher suicide rates than females in every age group from data from 2017 to 2019.
So 92% of transgender adults have attempted suicide before the age of 25.
And LGBT teens and adults have higher rates of reported suicide symptoms.
So 78% of gender minority students reported at least one symptom of a mental health condition. Gonna look at the next slide. It's the BIPOC population.
So Black and African American teenagers are more likely to attempt suicide than white teenagers.
So people who identify as being 2 or more races are more likely to report any mental illness within the past year than any other race ethnic group.
The suicide death rate for Native Indigenous people in America between the ages of 15 and 19 is more than double that of non-Hispanic whites.
So 8.6% of Latinx Hispanic from age 18 to 25 years old had serious thoughts of suicide in 2018, compared to 7% in 2008.
And serious mental illness rose from 2.9% to 5.6% in AAPI people ranges 18 to 25 between 2008 and 2018. We know these numbers are troubling and distressing and maybe shocking to us, how deep this crisis is with mental health. This was, and as the numbers indicate, this was a growing problem and crisis before 2020 even happened. And we deliberately excluded 2020 statistics because we're hoping that moving forward, we're at the tail end of the height of the pandemic and the height of that increased mental health issues. But students reporting in surveys done by the JED Foundation and Active Minds did indicate that students definitely did increase in 2020 in reporting higher amounts of anxiety, isolation, depression, and fatigue. So we'll take a pause at this second to give us a few minutes to digest these heavy statistics before we move on. As we move on now we're going to discuss some roadblocks to access to treatment or seeking treatment, to accessing care. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, and to preface, it's also worthy of its own discussion entirely of just some of these roadblocks. And so we're going to give a high-level overview and knowing and being mindful that this is just scratching the surface of all of these deeper issues.
And also, I guess, like in the beginning, I asked a question about what would be some of the challenges, right? Right now, you can bring those answers and we can explore this together.
So Jiaobao and I will be discussing together the different roadblocks, some different roadblocks to treatment. And this little graph or diagram is to just indicate that we advise whole students and not just their academic identity, as I learned the term from a presentation I went to recently, that each of us as individuals and our students also are working with societal, cultural, and community expectations, roles, and objections and objectives within our own individual beliefs, and then so forth. And that's what this little diagram is meant to represent. And so starting with society, and in the United States is in a patriarchal society with pretty rigid gender roles and expectations. Dr. Anthony Rostaine, in writing about these issues, coined the term a culture of trauma in the post 9/11 era. So think about the last 20 years since 9/11, which can be shocking to think that that's been 20 years. This is the age of students generally we're seeing that have grown up post 9/11 in a culture of trauma, in a society that's been impacted by terrible traumas of political trauma, economic trauma, and most recently a global pandemic health trauma and civil unrest trauma as well. And they've grown up in this culture of consistent trauma. And then of course, we know by reading the news and of 2020 and even now of racial traumas to marginalized groups in our society in the United States and around the world. But if I was to ask you all, how does our society define what it means to be a man, and ultimately what it defines for the masculine identity in help seeking or seeking out help? Think about that for a moment. What things come to mind? The Men's Resource Center of Western Michigan puts it this way: what we have discovered in our many years of working with a wide range of men is this: many aspects of their lives influence their thinking, their feelings and behavior, including genetic makeup, family of origin, and cultural and economic backgrounds. The one common factor in the role of masculinity in particular is the socialized drive that virtually all men share to be tough enough, stoic enough, strong enough, and man enough. So thinking about that societal expectation of help seeking, some of the messages that our society teaches our youth, and our male youth and female youth, and across the gender identities, The Cure so famously said in their hit single from the 80s, "Boys don't cry." This unfortunate gender stereotype is literally killing our boys and our male college students, and all men, and those that identify as male. Help seeking has been gendered as feminine and something to avoid at all cost, even at the loss of male life in our patriarchal society. Our male students and those that are resistant to therapy or discussing emotional needs are worried about being vulnerable and are afraid of losing face to that stereotype that I have to do this all on my own. The society expectation of owing someone something for helping is also a roadblock in that pride and vulnerability paradox. If I ask for help, then I'm going to owe them something in return, and they're going to demand that I give them something back. And that is another roadblock there. Those with marginalized identities and multiple marginalized identities that are having that conflict between their individual beliefs and feelings and expressions and identities against what their community, culture, and society are also expecting can be in conflict, which causes a more emotional exhaustion when they don't have access to treatment or culturally competent treatment, or aren't feeling safe to ask for help because they don't want to risk their independence or vulnerability.
Yeah, and also culture is kind of like intertwined with society. Culture is also like a complex term. It means a lot of things. So here's something I want to pinpoint is there is like a culture of judgment, right? So it can reflect in the community you live in. It may be reflecting the family you've grown up in. Like we call this like the family of origin, right? So especially we see those culture of judgment or high expectation among those like high achieving students, especially like in the STEM field, like engineering is like a highly competitive program. So people have this high expectation about themselves. They hold this belief about, oh, I cannot let my family down. I need to work harder. Now, a lot of people, they talk about, oh, imposter syndromes, right? So I feel I'm not good enough, right? So I need to figure this out by myself. Otherwise, that means I'm not good enough. And also, like, in the family culture about judgment, so you will hear, okay, so in some religious group or some like people going to church and pray, right? So if you pray more, you're not gonna have any problem, right? So just like hand your emotional issues to God, right? So if you do that enough, then you won't have any problem. So, and don't share that part with people because other people are gonna look at you differently. They're gonna see you as inadequate. You're gonna see you as not good enough. So there's a lot of the culture is putting those judgments and which like individual, especially like student, they internalize that from their family or from their peers.
And additionally, in community organizations, think about what community is. It could be the community at your institution, the engineering community, the D&D community, but there's issues within that and judgment and lack of understanding. So I met with a student that was petitioning, since I work with students that petition for withdrawals and different exemptions to policy, who did reach out to a university staff person and was not given what they felt understanding or care, and they felt discouraged because that the organizational person didn't understand the issues they were having, and they left feeling dejected. And along with that, so access to care and judgment, and within those communities, again, those same things of judgment, of stigma, vulnerability, and being afraid to be judged or seen as weak, needy, or incompetent.
Yeah, and all of this kind of come together to impact people at the individual level. Right, so I think because I'm a male clinician, I got a lot of like male identified student coming in to see me. So the two common emotions I usually see, which is also something we see very common for the general population coming here for counseling, are shame and fear. So there is like, I'm afraid about losing control over my emotions if I start to express that. It's not something I used to, right? So I never learned how to do that. So I'm afraid I may not do it well, or I may lose control. If I start to cry, I cannot stop crying, and I don't want to do that, right? So there's also the shame, like we talk about, oh, men just don't cry, right? So you just need to be strong, just like toughen up, right? Use humor, right? So use some other ways to distract you. Think about something positive, right? So you gotta be strong. Yeah, so just like, oh, it's a shame to my pride, so I cannot express that. This feels so wrong to me if I start to talk about something. It's even make me start to feel embarrassed already, just like thinking about the idea about sharing my deep feelings. So I just want to escape and run away from this kind of conversation.
Great points, Chao Bao. And conceal, don't feel might be a popular lyric in a cartoon song, but it is really terrible and deadly advice. For sure. So now we've talked about roadblocks. The next, we're going to transition to talking about advising strategies as we're working one-on-one with a student, as an advisor or another higher education professional. So Jiao Bao is going to take the lead on this one.
Yeah, so I think everyone gonna get a handout about this page. So there are 7 steps we're gonna talk about. I mean, the key factors here is to create a space to explore together about what's going on and what is some of the challenges or roadblocks the student have, and then to validate them, right? It makes sense for you to think or feel like that. Then provide the support, ask them what do you need, and then provide a resource. So I guess before we step into step one, I mean, this is something I call step zero, right? Which is like consistent with our presentation today. Just be mindful about kind of like your own roadblocks, right? So just like your own blocks about mental health or seeking help for counseling. Some things can be, oh, students crying in front of me. Oh, what is the big deal? It seems like they're making a big deal out of this like small thing. So maybe there's some like personal beliefs or some like personal reactions when I hear a student sharing something with me, right? So I guess step zero, or like the foundation about our presentation today, is just be more aware or be more mindful about, oh, what's happening inside of me when I hear the student sharing a story. So when we start a conversation, first we want to respect the student's independence and autonomy, right? So we want to invite them to start a conversation. So I want to ask, are they willing to talk with me or someone else, right? So first we want to start with that. And then I want to express my concern genuinely in a non-judgmental way, right? Just like something you've noticed. It can be something change about their behaviors, or just if you know the student, right? It can be something you notice has shifted since you met with the student last time. And you can ask open-ended question, or you can just express, oh, I'd like to know how things are going with you, right? Just, if the student express any concern, you can explore a little bit about, oh, I'm curious about, you're concerned about this and this issue. Right, I guess we want to hold this attitude about being curious. So step three is to explore, just like the roadblocks, right? So what for this student, what are some of the challenges that keeps them from seeking help for counseling? So you can explore by asking, what do they know about mental health? Do they have any experience with counseling? How was that like for them? Right? So you can reframe mental health just as physical health, right? You got to see a doctor with a broken arm. So this is also, you just came to see a counselor just to get things fixed, right? And we also want to acknowledge their roadblocks with validation, right? So we want to validate both the content they're talking about and the emotions coming up, right? So we want to validate with some compassion and also avoid any judgment or criticism. So things like, it makes sense for you to think or feel like that. So they may hold on to a stigma of mental health. So it makes sense because they grown up in a family like that, or in a society or culture that is holding a lot of stigma towards mental health, mental illness, right? So it makes sense why you think like that. And we also want to acknowledge it is difficult to take the first step to ask for help. So it is difficult and it is normal, right? So now we came to step 5. We want to normalize the process, right? So even just like, oh, college, graduate school is really difficult, right? So I don't think you're the only one who struggle like that. Just to normalize, oh, this may not be your own problem. It's just some like adjustment issue, just everyone struggles, but they may have different tools or different strategies about how they cope with those issues. So maybe like we can explore together, or maybe you want to talk with someone just to explore those things. So you can also share, like just like do a little bit self-disclosure if you have the relationship with the student. Just keep it short and simple, because the goal of the self-disclosure is to make them feel, oh, their experience is very normal, right? And also step 6, right? So we want to highlight their strengths. So we already talked about struggles, challenges. We don't want to forget to mention, oh, it takes so much for you to share this with me. Right? I really see you were so courageous about doing so much. Right? You want to let them know, hearing the story, you have some reaction, you have some feelings. You really admire their strengths. So you want to hold space for both their struggles and their strengths. So step 7 is to put things together, right? So like I mentioned, just like summarize both the challenging part and the strong part, right? So, and ask the student, what do you need, right? So, and so if there, I mean, most university have, I mean, basically every university have resource about mental health. So ask the student, do they know about the resource on campus, right? So if they don't know, you can explain the service to them and how the student can access to the service. You can even put in a way about just, oh, in case a friend may need that, right? Or maybe you don't need that now, but it's good to keep that in mind. And also you can re-emphasize, just like talking about the mental health or counseling services in a positive way. Oh, it is like collaborative work between you and the counselor. They're just here to kind of like discuss a plan about maybe adding some tools like to your toolbox. So it can be something very neutral, right? Just like some extra support you can use along the way in addition to advising. Yeah. So now we're gonna talk about something in a broader way. So Emily gonna take the turn. Yeah.
Yeah, but Xiao Bao, thank you for that. And you brought to mind two experiences I had from, I teach an online class with another institution, and I had a student, an international student who is male, contact me. So we were talking on WhatsApp, and he said, I was so frustrated with this assignment, I was nearly in tears. And I was shocked by that, primarily for him to just openly disclose being that frustrated to almost crying about how frustrating it was. And somewhat because he was male, that was shocking, but also thinking about individually my thoughts about emotional disclosure and crying and showing emotion. So it was a little jarring. So, and I had to stop and reflect about my feelings about those kinds of things, interacting with a student. And then as an advisor, I had a student come in for a petition that disclosed to me that they were petitioning because they had tried to commit suicide and they were hospitalized. And I sat and I was pretty shocked that they would openly disclose that. So following Xiao Bao's advice, I said, you know, that is very courageous and brave of you to disclose that to me. I didn't have a previous relationship with the student, but and so I wanted to reaffirm that it was very courageous for him to talk about that and how he's doing now and steps he's taking to regroup and to move on and progress. So those are just two anecdotes that I had related to what Xiao Bao has shared. Moving on, I'm going to discuss some things we can do as in our departments, our campus, and more globally. So some campus strategies, and these were adapted from a wonderful research article that we came across from the National Institute of Health Research, Biomedical Research Center in South London, and the Maudsley National Health Service Foundation Trust and King's College London. And as Xiao Bao pointed out, we will be sharing a Google Drive link at the end in the Q&A window or box, that you can have access to that handout of those 7 advising strategies, and you have a resource document that will link you to this research article that I'm mentioning as far as some campus strategies. So number 1, so integrate mental health into formal education. So at the University of Utah, we have mandatory advising. There's also everyone has orientation. I came across a student petitioning for a general education class exception that syllabus from that class at that institution had the number to the counseling center and the crisis line right in the syllabus. So these are some examples of that. So when my department and the academic affairs team in the College of Engineering meets with undecided students, we often will say, as Jiao Bao mentioned, not that we tell every student at orientation, at MAP, that mandatory advising, not that you've displayed any indication at this time, but I want you to be aware of these resources that are free to you. And also too, if you have a friend, let them know if they talk to you, you know, they're just saying they're discouraged or stressed, that you know how to connect them. And the research from this group found that mental health initiatives for male students are most successful when positioned when it's most likely to engage them, particularly at the beginning of a university orientation or during exam periods. So thinking about that and your population at orientation, if you have mandatory advising, or right before exams, doing some initiatives there. Second is student-led informal communities focused on problem solving. So these are community-driven, not formal or with lots of agenda, but let the students form that. For example, in the College of Engineering, we have a new group for students. It's student-led for neurodiverse students. And what helps is that it's a community of like individuals. So we talk about community and how important it is to have somebody that understands your struggles. And that's what this group is doing, is helping the students talk to each other about what works best for study skills and time management in a neurodiverse environment from each other. And that's been a recent launch, and I think they've had their second meeting, but it's been going very well and will continue. Another place, so we know that from the first slides that students aren't going, a lot of students with anxiety and depression, nearly 70% aren't going to counseling. So where are they going? They're going to the internet to find community. They're going to Discord, Twitch, Reddit, and Canvas to discuss and share their struggles because it's anonymous. And where else are they going? They're going to their friends and family. And that can be good or bad. And in fact, there was a student petitioning that went through a traumatic event and was referred to go to the counseling center, but chose not to. And now they kind of regret it, that they listened to their family and friends. So friends can give bad advice, and we need to help mitigate some of that bad advice. And some of it I do see on Reddit as well. We need to streamline access to care. How easy is it to find access to services and resources at your institution? Is it buried through lots of clicks and confusing websites, or can a student in crisis or just curiously exploring or making that first initial step, how easy is it to find how to talk to somebody or find help or resources? The research from showed that services, of course, funding is always an issue at every institution, but services should seek to make self-referrals less cumbersome and increase the availability of support staff to reduce waiting time. And I know everyone knows that and is trying very hard, and we do have restrictions, but that is a good best practice to work towards if possible. Secondly, positive changes to help seeking from male students have been increased when services are clearly signposted that step 1, step 2, step 3 for them. Male students require information about what treatment is like, as Jiao Bao indicated, walking through what it means, the content or duration of what it means to go talk to a counselor. And additional barriers, again, might be logistical or structural barriers or access to services based on their own population or identities, also face higher risk of not being able to access care. So as you think about that, a takeaway question for you at your institution and department is, what logistical and structural barriers to service do your students have, and what could be done, granted we don't have unlimited funding, to do to better the situation? Additionally, fourth point to talk about is tailored advertising. As Jiao Bao mentioned, messaging it and reframing how we talk about seeing a counselor in analogies like if you cut your arm or break your arm, you go to the doctor. When your car doesn't work, you take it to the shop for expert advice to fix it. And when something is wrong, you fix it. The same with mental health. It doesn't mean the whole car is bad. It means there's a piece that needs to be repaired or worked on to get fully functioning again. And so using some of those analogies might help reframe the counseling experience for male and male identifying students. Also, additionally, the research found when promoting mental health initiatives, as participants reported labels of mental health and well-being, they should be avoided because they could discourage attendance. And then men can often reject services that use psychiatric or diagnostic frameworks that seem to label emotional distress as mental illness. Not all emotional distress automatically means a formal mental illness diagnosis. So avoiding a name that emphasizes mental health could also help engage those students that might be experiencing distress, but not a formal mental health disorder. And the inspiration for this presentation, with permission, he gave me to disclose this, what he said. He said he was resistant at first to speak with a university counselor, and he said, first and foremost, going to therapy does not mean you're weak. In fact, he wouldn't even call it therapy. I would simply just call it going to have a conversation with another person. Having a person to listen to you on a topic, any topic that is on your mind, is so helpful. Many times just getting things off your chest, you'll start to help heal yourself or help yourself. Even if the person is there to listen, it's still beneficial. It's not therapy, it's just going to get things off your chest. So that's how you could reframe it and think about that. From a student that was initially resistant, who did finally make that plunge and was brave to do that. And additionally, with male role models, that will help initiate a conversation. So there have been several notable male celebrities and notable individuals that have publicly come out and talked about their struggles with mental health and emotional distress, such as Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, as one notable example. And reframing, asking for help to seem is more masculine, as we discussed. And then training. You're here today and you're part of the UAA and other campus communities to learn how to improve your practice and learn how to have culturally competent care, to be mindful of the different points of views and identities and intersectionality of identities that each of our students bring to us, and being mindful and respectful of those different identities as we work with them and discussing emotional health and mental health issues. So I'll let you digest that for a moment. So next, this is a case study. This is a real life example that was posted anonymously on a public forum. So this is a real student sharing their experience. Go ahead and read it, and I'll read it out loud too. I have not communicated with any of my professors about what I've been going through. I am terrified to do so. I can't imagine they could really understand how difficult it has been for me this semester. And I don't want to be seen as a delinquent looking for redemption at the end of the semester because I lost interest or became lazy. I really don't know what to do. I am so scared of failing and so afraid of telling the people around me how bad I've been doing. I don't know who to reach out to at the university about what's been going on. And I don't even know if there's any way anyone could help. I have wanted to be in my program for years, and I feel like I'm wasting all of my work in high school. My pronouns are he, him, if anyone wants to know how to refer to me. So what we'd like to invite you to do is think about how, if the student came to you, found their way to you, what are some things you would say? What are some things you would start with? What would you say to this student, this real student? What would you say to them? And feel free to put any responses in the Q&A section. And we'll love to hear from your responses. If you want to share.
Well, I think people can just speak up if they can have their voice unmute.
Unfortunately, they're not able to speak up. They can only put things in the Q&A.
Oh, okay.
Now, as the slide progressor, I'm not able to see the Q&A, so if there is anything in the Q&A to share, those that can see it, if you please feel welcome to share what participants have posted.
Nothing there so far.
All right, well, we'll move on to the next portion of this, and keep that in mind. There's a lot to unpack with this student, and it is very emotional and hard for us as advisors and student professionals to hear a student disclose this, and our hearts do go out because we do want to help them, hence why we're in this profession. So in the next part,
I think like something, just like a quick comments about some of the roadblocks, right? Just like we can see in the first paragraph, there's like fear and shame, right? So, and there's also like not knowing what's gonna happen and where to find help, right? So, yeah, I think we see those roadblocks. So basically, it's like how we can help the student with appropriate resource to deal with the roadblocks.
yeah, great comments, Jiao Bao. And yeah, it's just like it hits all of those things, those roadblocks. This student is facing all of them. And this could be a student that I met with this week. I mean, I wonder, anyone, like, is this the same student? Because these are some of the things that student disclosed to me, but not exactly. But I was wondering.
We got 2 comments actually, so yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and see about the comments.
Yeah, so first one, that sounds very difficult, and you are right. I can't fully understand what you've been through, but I'd love to listen to you so I can try to better understand. Yeah. I can see there's like acknowledgement, and there's also normalize it, right? And also like some self-disclosure to support the student. Yeah.
Great answer.
And also thanks for opening up and reaching out for help.
Great answer. I feel like Family Feud. Good answer, right? And moving on. Now I invite any of you to, Jiao Bao, if you want to talk about this slide or this part.
Yeah. I think just for the time being, we want to keep it short, right? So yeah, just like feel free to type in some of the strategy in your department, college, or that is happening on campus that you are currently using to connect with male or male identifying students who need mental health services. So just feel free to type in your answer, just what you guys were currently doing or what is happening in your place. Oh, there are a few more comments. Yeah, they're saying like for step 0, having some handouts ready for the student, and then continue with the moment and conversing with them and seeing what made the semester hard. I think this is still the answer for the case. Right? And doing a warm handoff to appropriate services and seeing how the student wants to proceed. Yeah, it's just like respecting the autonomy, their independence, and protect the pride. Right? and being there for the student afterwards so they can come back and talk with you. Yeah, this is like showing that you are available whenever they need, right? So you are there for them. It's expressing the genuine care. So I guess we can keep moving since we don't have much time left, right? So yeah.
But thank you all for those that have put responses in the Q&A and we can learn together. You guys all sound like pros. So great, I love that things that you've suggested. As we conclude, President Obama said, if you break your leg, you're going to go to the doctor to get that leg healed. If something inside you feels like it's wounded, it's just like a physical injury. You've got to go get help. There's nothing weak about that. It's strong. We have as we conclude, we've talked about the growing mental health, the severity of the mental health crisis that our students are facing. We've talked about roadblocks to accessing care. We've talked about advising strategies and campus strategies and had some discussion. As we conclude, we have a real crisis on our hands and we are the frontline responders that are uniquely poised to directly impact our students' whole life. We can make a difference against those destructive expectations that around help seeking and emotional wellness and resilience that are not just our male students and those that identify as male face, but all of our students face. You know, one person we might like, well, I'm just one person, but that one person, we can make that difference. This whole presentation, all of you are here because one student was brave enough to disclose to me how they were struggling, which opened my eyes to start researching this issue and just seeing how much of an issue it is for our male and male identifying students specifically, but of course all students and those that might be in marginalized identities as well. And you know, initially this student was not that kind of guy, but because of his bravery, he is now that kind of guy. So he's inspired us all to reframe and rethink how we think about mental health internally and as we work with our students more effectively. You know, when someone is close to that edge, we may never know what inner turmoil is going on in that student's mind when they smile and say everything is fine and we've got to move on to the next 20 appointments to go through. Most of us have heavy caseloads as counselors or higher educational professionals or advisors, but we can make a difference by being holistically available for our students and the whole student. Author and therapist Terry Real said, we need whole men. You can be a man and cry, and you can be a woman and speak up. We can step outside the frame of patriarchy. We don't have to be determined by it. And so I want you to, hopefully you found some use in this presentation, and Jiao Bao, if you had like to say some closing remarks as well.
Yeah, I think something I wanna mention again is just I think the more we talk about counseling as just like part of the normal resource, like during like college or graduate school time, it's not something like, oh, you have a lot of issues, that's why you need to know this. It's just something we always let students know. This is just a part of the campus, right? Just like something is available there in case you need it. So we want to normalize that, right? And also, as I mentioned earlier, we want to be more aware about our own beliefs, thoughts, or feelings when we handle those issues. We want to be more mindful about that. And also we want to remember to hold space for both parts, the vulnerable part and the part with strengths, right? So we want to let the student know we are seeing them as a whole person, not just like one person asking for solution for their problem. We do see their strengths, right? And we are here for them. It's like, this is the place for them to grow and become the person they want to be. And this is part of their journey. So.
Well, thank you, Jiao Bao, and it's been great to learn from your expertise as well. So we are literally out of time, so we're thankful everybody came today, and we go to the next slide, and that has our emails. And I will stop sharing screen if I can manage that. I did. I'm learning Teams, so we learn together. And I will throw in QA the link to our handouts and materials.
Yeah, I actually post that.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Work together, teamwork, excellent.
Just one more comment here, like